In the last parameter video we discussed the crown, the inlay, onlay, and the veneer parameter. In this parameter video we're going to discuss the global parameters for the abutment anatomic and the two abutment frameworks. Now there's three sets of parameters, and the differences are in the abutment anatomic, this is going to be a full contour abutment and crown in one. So basically you're making a screw retained crown onto a titanium base. Actually all three of these are going to be fitting on the titanium bases. So the anatomic abutment is screw retained, one solid structure over the titanium base. The abutment framework is simply only making the abutment and no overlay or multi-layer veneering structure. And the abutment framework is going to be when you are planning on making a split file or a veneering structure over the top. Now the parameters for these two abutment frameworks are exactly the same. If I go ahead and click on this, you'll see we've got minimal thicknesses, gingival depth, placement pressure, shoulder width, telescope angle, and the other abutment framework is exactly the same, but the reason that you have two parameters is if you see this transparent crown over the top of the abutment framework, you may choose to have a different parameters for this than you will this. Specifically, you may choose to have maybe a bigger telescope angle on this so it receives that multi-layer veneering structure a little bit easier. So let's go ahead and start with this abutment anatomic. Now you really at this point aren't going to be doing probably too many of these yet. The only thing that you could really mill full contour at this time over the titanium base would be the mesio, the pre-milled or pre-manufactured mesio block. Now I think why this parameter is in here is to make room for some of the new materials like the Emax abutment block that are going to be coming. So this is one solid unit, so you do have the basic shapes we discussed before. The milling offset, we'll have to set the milling offset for the whole unit. Since it's full contour, it's going to be the same really as you have your crown setting. Proximal contact strength, you can set your proximal or your occlusal contact strength. As far as your thicknesses, you can set these to whatever you would really want. I do recommend overriding them at this point in time, so we'll keep those at 700 and 700. Now the nice thing about this though is you have gingival depth parameters where you can kind of control a little bit about where that emergence profile is going to start. Placement pressure, we can put a little bit of pressure on the papilla, so you can set that whatever the clinical depth or whatever the case requires. Again, notice we don't have any margin thickness because this is going over the titanium base. Okay, if we go to the second, which is the abutment framework, now this is just simply creating an abutment over a titanium base, and this would be one that you would plan on rescanning. You're not doing a multi-layer veneering structure over the top. So you can set these again to whatever you want. You can override the minimal thicknesses. You can see the minimal thicknesses here. They're of the titanium bases. So you've got the radial of the titanium base. I recommend that be at 500. You've got the radial occlusal, we'll keep that at 700. Gingival depth is where you want that margin to be. Usually I'll usually start about 500 subgingival. These are the ones that will switch on the fly, and we can certainly discuss these. So gingival depth, gingival placement pressure, and especially shoulder width are things that I'll switch as I'm doing the restoration, but I typically would never have the shoulder width at a millimeter. I'll usually start at 600 microns. Telescope angle, you can afford to be a bit more parallel when you're going to rescan than if you're doing the veneering structure, so I'll just go ahead and keep this defaulted at 4 and hit OK. And the last parameter we'll take a look at would be the abutment framework, planning with the multi-layer. And really this is going to be about the same. Like I said, I do like to override these. Gingival depth, again, doesn't matter so much. Gingival placement pressure is going to depend on the case. Shoulder width will start at 600. The telescope angle I may raise up a little bit. You can see it. The telescope angle is basically the flare of the axial wall. Let's go to just 5 or maybe even 6. It's your choice depending on what you want to do there. And we'll hit OK. So that pretty much covers the abutment parameters for the global parameters for the abutments and the difference between these three parameters.